This is the Authentic Dating series brought to you by Ahmad and David,
where we explore what it takes to have a dating life you're excited about.
Hey guys, I'm David.
I'm Ahmad.
And this is the Authentic Dating series. So today we're going to be going over some awesome content once again. So we're going to be covering over what we think are the 5 secrets to a great conversation.
Yeah, this is a important topic because people often wonder when they're on a date or when they meet someone off the cuff, just anywhere, like how can they have a good conversation and really spark interest and leave the other person feeling like they've connected very well and they've got to know the person, and they themselves, also the person speaking, has conveyed themselves very well, and you know said what you needed to say.
Yeah, like you feel like you've presented you've kind of presented yourself and who you are and what you're about. Those are the things you kind of want to get across. So yeah, let's just leap straight into it, right? There's no point faffing around.
No.
Let's get in. The first point here is eye contact. You know, I see over the years that a lot of people really struggle with eye contact because it's like sometimes it feels like it could be a bit intense. Sometimes people feel like it's a bit weird. Like I always remember I have one of my old bosses actually. He had really intense eye contact. I really liked it because it felt like he was really kind of present and really listening to you. But I know that some people did find it a bit awkward and a bit weird. But yeah, go on, AJ.
No, I was just wondering then, because I know like when we were putting the topics before this podcast recording, you were the one who suggested eye contact, and I mean I may understand from my point of view why it's good, but why would you say it's good?
Because I think eye contact, let's look at the opposite. If you don't look at someone when you're talking to them, and I remember I used to have this bad habit of looking around the room and being very present to what's going on around me, but not necessarily the person I'm talking to. But actually, it just really leaves you with the feeling that someone's really listening to you. And as you guys can't see, but I'm really looking at Ahmad across here as we're talking. And it does, it really, and it also draws you in as a listener and as the person doing the talking as well. The eye contact really kind of locks you in between two people. And obviously, you don't want to kind of just stare with your eyes wide open, and you're going to break, obviously, because you need to blink. Blinking is really important, people. It's good to keep your eyes hydrated. But eye contact, I think, is really important for conversation. It just kind of connects two people on a really easy level.
Yeah, and as David said, like it gives that sense of connection. It's interesting when Dave said that because we naturally, as we started doing these podcasts, we realized it was important without even really talking about it. It was just important that we actually look at each other as we're talking so that we can really hear what the other person is saying. It's like if you're not looking, then it's easy to get distracted and have your attention wander off and go elsewhere, as I've just done now and realized that I didn't start the timer for this episode. So yeah, it's like when you're with someone to really give them your full attention, and especially in this day and age where so many of us get distracted by all the little notifications that we have that either come up on your phone or on your smartwatch or just on the TV. Yeah. It's just things are constantly buzzing and taking our attention away, and just simply looking.
Yeah, and just being with the person, because I think that what you're saying about smartphones and everything, there's so many things that distract you, and we're just so distracted all the time. Like our eyes are wandering around, and how often do you kind of sit and and there's something to think about. How often do you actually sit and just listen to someone you're talking to and actually look at them and just like actually look, instead of thinking or looking around the room for the next thing you need to do or the thing after that, or whatever it may be.
Well, would you say though there is a limit before eye contact? Too much? Is there such thing as too much eye contact?
I know it's really hard to judge, but I think there is a point where it is a bit weird no, it's not a bit weird. I feel that some breaking of eye contact is perfectly normal to kind of break away and look at other things. But for the most part, I think you want to, looking people in the eye when you're talking to them and they're talking to you.
Okay. All right. So the second thing that was really key in that we discussed was passionate communication. Really, when we're talking, to really feel connected to our emotions and what we're saying. And passionate communication comes off in 2 ways. There's obviously having passion for what you're saying, but then also being bold in your beliefs, in in your
Opinions?
Yeah, that's the word I'm thinking. Yeah, opinions. So yeah, but really like owning them and not being timid in expressing how you really feel about something. So an example would be, I love the chess one, because chess is, throughout all the ages, has often been seen as a geeky sort of thing. Not that geeky is bad, but the sense of like people tend to avoid what they think other people may not find interesting.
Yeah.
And really then, if you're passionate, then to speak passionately, and also expressing why you actually love something, not just simply to be just kind of blabbing on about it, but actually expressing to people as to why you feel a way of things. Maybe there's a story behind it, like, you know, maybe your grandfather taught you how to play chess, and that left an impression. You know, you really looked up to him as who he was as a character. And I'm just making this up here, by the way, guys. But no, maybe you really looked up to him, and you just, it keeps fond memories, and it really instilled a set of principles and discipline in you, you know, just as an example. Yeah.
I also think that, I think it's something we touched on in our first episode, but having opinions, you know, like having opinions about things, be willing to voice those opinions and being bold, like, you know, whether it be, think of an example of something I have an opinion about. What am I thinking? Football. Yeah. Football. You know, AJ, how do you feel about football?
I'm not a big fan. I don't watch football. I don't mind. The thing is, I haven't played for a long time, but I don't mind playing football, but I've never been an observer of sports.
Right. So he doesn't like football, basically.
Yeah.
You know, and that's fine to say that. You know, I might be talking to a guy or a girl who's football mad, and it's fine to disagree with people. I actually think it's healthy to disagree with people, and then it's interesting then to listen and understand what it is, why someone loves something and why they don't. Like, you know, an easy topic right now is Brexit, right? It's a very easy topic to talk to people about and be passionate about. I was out on a photo walk last week, and we got talking about Brexit, and it was a very, very passionate and bold conversation amongst about 4 or 5 of us, happily talking about it and why we think it's a bad idea and what's going wrong and blah, blah, blah. But that's an easy one, right? Because for the most part, most of the people I know and I meet are very anti-Brexit. But also it can come down to things like fashion. Like, I think, you know, I wouldn't say I was fashionable, but I'd say that the fashion industry is a very destructive industry. You know, it's really destroying the environment. I think it's one of the top 3 polluters in the world. And I feel that, you know, that's the way it is. Someone might completely disagree with me and say, you know, I don't agree. I think it does a lot of good and blah, blah, blah. And I'm happy to thrash that out and discuss that. And I'm willing to be bold in the conversation and willing to say things that people disagree with.
But would you not draw the line somewhere with that? Like, and say one could be perhaps too bold.
One can be too bold.
But wait, be too bold and potentially put people off. You know, especially on a date scenario, because I mean, what you're talking about there was very much like, you know, at work or in a networking sort of environment. On a date scenario, like, or in, you know, in that sort of environment, then perhaps speaking about Brexit and politics could be conceived as being perhaps maybe a little bit too antagonistic, maybe too polarized on a certain point.
Yeah, but I also think polarizing is good. I've recently picked up a book on AJ's recommendation, which is Models by Mark Mason.
Well worth a read, guys.
It's a very good book, actually.
And women.
And he talks about how, you know, his book's very much geared towards guys looking for girls, and his thing is that you should polarize. You should be, you know, there's 3 types of women. There's unreceptive women who basically don't want to talk to you for whatever reason. That might be they're married or blah, blah, blah. There's neutral women who they have no real opinion either way. And there's receptive women. And he said, his belief is with neutral women, you need to polarize them in some way, which is kind of putting out who you are and what you're about and seeing if they either completely go against who you are and they're not down with your values, or they are kind of in line with what your values are. And I think this is where being bold in your conversation, being passionate as well, really allows people to go, this is who this person is about, and this is what they're not about, or what they don't like, what they do like.
Yeah, like what I'm getting from that, David, is the sense that when we're passionate and we're speaking passionately, because often like the concern that arises is, I'm going to say something and the other person may be upset. And actually it's understanding that, well, that's not a bad thing. If someone's, it's not the case that you want to be going out upsetting people, but polarizing is more the case that you are cutting a character out for yourself. You are a character. You have like boundaries. You have like you're you have a definite outline of who you are, it's much easier to see you. You're no longer just like one of the many. You're actually a unique person with unique opinions, ideals, values. And
why would you say that that's a positive thing, like pointing out that you are unique?
Well, well, simply standing out, I think it's actually, and in fact, now that you mentioned Mark Mason, I believe he actually does say in that book, there's a case that not enough people have opinions on stuff.
Yes.
And
amen.
And yeah,
preach, brother, preach.
And so it's a case of like, well, if you're always agreeable and you're never actually saying, well, actually, this is how I feel, or putting forward your personal perspective, and often people don't really have opinions on stuff. So even in the case of, say, like me, not watching football, having an opinion on that, and not just saying, oh, I don't like it, but actually expressing it. And actually, I mean, I can say what it was for me was when I was young, and I moved schools, and in the new school, everyone knew about football, and all the kids were collecting stickers. And there were so many different stickers and so many different names. I thought, I'm never going to learn this. And so I just thought, no, I just gave up there, and I moved to basketball.
Yes. Yeah.
But the point is more the case of like really knowing yourself, as opposed to just being very bland. And by knowing yourself, it's like the difference between buying a suit from just like any brand suit name and buying a highly tailored suit, a very bespoke suit, which is just tailor made for you. It fits you. It stands out. It's made from the better quality material. It's this sort of stuff. So when you really know why you think what you think, then you really stand out.
Yeah, I think I really agree there. Like, being the fact that you standing out, I think, is one of the most important things when it comes to dating. A lot of people kind of get hung up on, in kind of conforming, and actually, I'd actually say it's the complete opposite. You really want to stand out, and you want to be who you are through, your passion and your boldness and your opinions and your beliefs as well.
So moving on then, the next thing that we saw as being, or we thought of as being a really important topic, and we're really going to break this one down because it's not as straightforward, as simple as people would think, right? And it's listening. And the reason I'm laughing, because listening, most people think, well, listening.
It's just listening, right? I've got my ears, I'm listening.
That's exactly what I was thinking, yeah. So it's just like, yeah, I've got 2 ears, the noise goes in, and I hear it, and then I'm listening. But it's actually, you know what? It's actually one of the number one complaints from, especially from women, but from people in general in conversations, when people don't listen, what often is the case is that they just feel like they haven't been heard, and they then don't really build a true connection.
Yeah. There's nothing more frustrating in an interaction. This could be work, it could be on a date you're on, it could be with your partner. Like, what's the number one thing that your girlfriend, your wife, your husband always complains about, right? Is that people don't listen, right? Especially men, we get this real bad rap that none of us ever listen about anything because we're all kind of too busy thinking about football. But listening is I'd say one of the most important skills you need for your life. Message.
Yeah. No, it genuinely is, because I mean, again, listening goes beyond dating, and it's just like a general good life skill. So what we wanted to share about listening is that people may have heard of like active listening. This idea of like listening in a particular way, like really bringing your focus. And I know they talk about this active listening in corporate environments a lot, and especially in like consulting or sales roles.
So what would you say active listening is?
Well, active listening is a sense of really focusing on what you're hearing in a particular way. Okay. So like listening. So what we discussed before, what we came up with was that this idea that first and foremost, for most people, they already have a model of listening, like what we were saying, like the already, what was it, how do you say it? The already
always listening.
Yeah, the already.
It's so you would say that's like a way of listening to someone about hearing them, like you almost start to make an assumption of what they're saying before they've even said it.
So then active listening would be to be focusing like first and foremost being aware that you may have a prejudice in how you're thinking about what they're saying.
So you'd say it's like almost prejudiced listening to someone.
Yeah. Often we already assume, right? Well, I say obviously I would just assume there. So often we already assume that we know what someone's going to say, especially if we know them well, or especially if they fit into a certain archetype of character.
So would you have like an example?
An example could be, well, especially like Dave just mentioned about in relationships, especially with a partner who you've been seeing for a long time, then their character develops and you get a sense that you feel like you already know how that person's going to talk. Like maybe it's the weekend and that's a day when you do the household chores and you know your partner tends to get upset around that time if you don't do your bit. And it's just a case of like, then it's easy to fall into a pattern of thinking, well, oh, she's upset because I haven't done this, and then responding from that way.
So it'd be like those kind of examples where, you know, you're at home with your girlfriend and she says, oh, have you taken the trash out? And the guy kind of responds with this kind of quite aggressive tone of like, oh, I'm going to do it in a minute. But all she's actually asked, the only questions she's asked there is, have you done it? She's not, you know, having a go. She's just asking the question, which is pretty reasonable. But his listening for her is that she's nagging, right? Before she's even said anything.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah. So back to active listening. So active listening is like, well, actively listening is really bringing your focus and your attention to it. And why this is important on a date is because especially for a lot of guys I know who walk into a date and they're already nervous. They're already feeling that they might have some hang-ups about their own dating ability, their own confidence in who they are. And so then when they're sat across from a woman or whomsoever, they already feel like that the other person is going to treat them like the last like date they were on the last dates and so on. Okay. And so in that sense, they're no longer present. So the idea of active listening is actually to be present to the other person in such a way that you really hear the words that they're saying.
Yeah. Instead of making an assumption about what they're saying to you or what those words mean to you.
Yeah. Like what you already think they're going to say and how you think people always interact with you. And so what we come up with was like three sort of steps to developing this sense of active listening, which we'll go through now. So the first thing is to actually hear just the words, like to actually just hear the words that were said. So let's say like David just said there about taking the trash out. And so actually just hearing what were the actual words that were said. And then, so what was it? It was just like, can you take the trash out?
Have you taken the trash out?
Yes, have you taken the trash out, right? So then just hearing the words. The second level behind that is then hearing the emotion. So the emotion of what was said earlier with Dave was like the sort of a tone. Almost there was a bit of an angry tone.
Have you taken the trash out?
Yeah. Well, actually, but then there you go. See, I assume that perhaps it was an angry tone, but then really in the actual situation, what is the emotion?
It could just be inquisitive. It could be being inquisitive and wondering about it, right?
Well, actually, no. If I switch now to a different example, a simpler one. And it's actually a really common one, which is when you first meet someone and they say hello. And you can really glean a lot of information just by the way someone says hi. Yeah. Or, you know, when you ask them how are you doing and they answer, you can really get a lot about what's going on for a person. So the first step is, you know, what are the words? And they said hi, they said fine or I'm okay. And then you see what the emotions are behind the words. And the emotions can be quite telling. So like I did this exercise with David earlier.
He's always doing his exercise on me before. It's
really
not fair, you know. I'm like a little guinea pig here.
And then I bring it up on the podcast.
It was stupid.
But it was quite cool because it really did work. So I asked David the simple question, "How are you doing?" He said, "Hey," he was okay.
Yeah, he said, "Oh, hey, how you doing?" I was like, "Yeah, everything's grand."
So there were the words, right? Everything's grand, and then. The emotion, though, that I picked up with David was actually it was quite flat. So and you'll notice now that when you go out and, you know, especially in the morning when you meet your colleagues at work or whoever your partner, and you ask them, good morning and how's your day and stuff, and they answer, you'll notice that most often actually people don't answer, their emotion isn't in alignment with what they just answered with. Yeah, it's actually, sadly, it's actually quite flat in most cases. People tend to be quite flat in their emotion. So then the first step was the words, second step's the emotion, and then the third step is, well, then if you've got the words and the emotion, what is the underlying message? So what I got for David in this particular case was that as much as he was saying, yeah, everything was great, and even though it was an example and he knew I was doing an example, but he didn't know what I was up to, it's like getting a sense of what's actually going on for someone. So then you're getting a whole picture that because in most people, they just went, oh, but that person said they were fine, so they must be fine. But no, you can pick up a lot more just from paying attention to these three things. So again, you listen to the actual words that were said, then you listen to what was the emotion behind the words, and then you listen to the underlying message when you put all of that together. Yeah.
No, it's a really powerful thing actually. I really actively do this with people a lot myself, where, I'll ask really simple questions, especially like, hey, how are you doing? Especially not my close friends, like, hey, how are you doing? And then I'll kind of hit our first point, eye contact, and you hear them and they go, you're like, hey, how's things? They're like, yeah, everything's great. And you kind of think, that was a big lie. Everything's not great. And sometimes you not let them talk, but they talk on a bit more. And then you kind of go, but are you sure everything's all right? Like, are you sure everything's cool? Because you're actually interested, right? You care.
Yeah. And that's actually our fourth point, which is taking an interest.
Oh, damn, I didn't mean to do that.
Yeah. No, but it's true.
Segue.
But that's the thing. It's like it actually leads to this taking an interest, because when you're listening with this perspective, then you're naturally having to care about what this person is saying. Well, I say natural, but this is the fourth point here is taking interest in the person and caring about it.
But what about the times where, someone says to you, yeah, you say, how are you doing? And they say, yeah, I'm fine. And then you do say, oh, look, are you sure you're okay? Isn't that kind of intruding on someone, or kind of, prying maybe?
Well, from the point of view of actually caring, then if you're doing it for your own personal gain of intruding or trying to get something, so for me in communication, I always fall back on your intention, and that's why with anything that we say on the podcast or any tidbits of advice, it's always with the idea and the intention that you're developing yourself as an authentic person, expressing and understanding and connecting with people. So from the point of view of connecting and really caring from your, I want to say your heart space, but yeah, from that,
from your heart chakra.
Yeah, from that deepness in soul, from your soul. But if you're really, then naturally, just from these methods, it's very clear. And it's a good question actually, because we often get questions from guys who say, they said something they introduced themselves to a woman, and they said whatever they said, they said hi, they made a compliment, and then they get brushed off, and then they really take that to heart. And one of the biggest pieces of advice I always have for any man or any woman as well, for who are out there, putting themselves out there, being vulnerable and sharing themselves, is always remember that your intention was never to offend the person.
Yeah.
So intention is always key. But if your intention is to offend the person and then they're offended, don't be surprised.
Yeah.
so that's what I would say about that, Dave.
Yeah, I think it's really something that I really care about people, like the people around me, the people in my life, even the people I work with. Like, I actually take a real interest in them as human beings, because God, it makes everyone's life better. I just feel that in terms of having great conversation and also building a really genuine connection with people, being interested in them as human beings and what they love, what they're interested in, just makes life for you better, and also for them. It makes the world a better place. Like, really out here making the world a better place.
But how would you actually go about doing that? Because for a lot of people I know, especially some years ago when I was really kind of struggling in this area of communication and talking, was like, whoa, what questions do I ask? What do I say? What's the right thing? I know that the question in my head back then was like, what's the right thing to say? But do you have any advice around that?
I think it's I think what the key here, the really important thing has always been for me, is that I'm willing to kind of talk freely and openly about myself and what I love doing and what I am passionate about. And also when I see someone talking with passion about what they do and what they enjoy, whatever it may be, you know, whether it be a woman I've met and she works in fashion and she's really, you know, she really loves her industry. And I really get sucked in by people's passion, because like as soon as someone starts talking to me in a passionate manner, like I'm interested. I'm like, oh, what do they do? That sounds really interesting. You know, and I start asking more and more questions, like how do things work? Why is this the way it is? Oh, how do those two things fit together? Because I'm really listening, you know, and I'm putting the dots together, and I'm also combining it with my own personal knowledge of that subject or other subjects. Like, there's nothing more interesting to me when I meet someone and they do something or they're involved in something that I have no knowledge of at all. I'm like, oh, wow, I don't know nothing about this. Like, I want to learn about this. Or in the case of, I've met people who from countries I've never been to, and I'm straight away like, oh, you're from there? Oh, I've never been there. I don't know anyone who's been there. Like, if I know the capital, then I may, you know, ask some questions. I'm like, what's life like? What's the food like? What are the people like? You know, I'm just really, you know, I'm really interested.
So you're trying to really understand who they are as well as conveying who you are.
Yeah, actually, because that puts me, I guess, as someone who is really interested in the world, who I'd say, like, I personally really am, and I'm interested in people, and I'm interested in how things work and how things are and the history of things, you know? I say things and people and the world.
Cool. I get that. All right. So the final thing we wanted to say is really something that's crucial in having a great conversation. And it's actually letting go of control of the conversation. And what this means is not going into a conversation like we've mentioned some very specific things that you can do. But, you know, if you ever to observe us in a conversation, it would be hard to discern when we were doing these things. You know, sometimes we'll be holding eye contact. Other times you may observe, you know, us asking a particular question or talking about our own self. And it's all just a medley of just having fun and being in the flow. And so one of the key things in any interaction is to allow the interaction to unfold in its own beautiful way, and not trying to, it's not like a work interview where you have like a set of questions and you must have the answer, and it has to be done in 5 minutes, and you know, it's not one of those stress tests. It's more a case of really enjoying and getting to know the other person, and a dance. The conversation is more of a dance.
So you're saying that you should, you know, just for some of our listeners here, this might sound like an odd concept to be in a conversation and not trying to kind of move the conversation in a certain direction. Like, how do you kind of enter a conversation or go about in a conversation without kind of trying to move the conversation in a direction you want it to go?
One of the biggest things I learned over the years, and it seems tricky, is what I want to say. And so it's one of those things that seems tricky, but what I've really learned over the years is to have an intention for what it is that when I'm having a conversation. So now for most people in the dating scenario, it's like they want to connect with the person, they want to like progress from a first date to a second date, they want to create an ambience. Maybe they want to make things more romantic. They want to get closer to the other person. They want, you know, so what I have learned is just having in mind that this is where I love the interaction to go. But then also being very clear about the fact that, you know, I'm also here to get to know someone. So it's inside of that, by having an intention of like, okay, I'd like to take this further. If, you know, this person is someone that I really like to take this further with, then really having that in the back of my mind, and then letting the interaction, like just letting the interaction flow.
Is that like the conversation just move in the winding ways through the valleys and the streams that conversation does move, instead of trying to kind of drive it down a road. Sometimes how you feel with people when you're talking to them and they're, you know, they've got like their checkpoints almost. And it's like, oh, we've talked about work for long enough. Now, what are your hobbies? You know, you move from what are your hobbies, and someone's like, okay, what's your family like? You know, and it feels very contrived. Yeah.
So I'm actually thinking like a good example was when I first met my girlfriend. So when we first met, it wasn't actually a date, and there was a point where I realized, like, no, there could be something, and then I thought to myself, oh no, like I didn't actually come out here with the intention of this being like a romantic meeting or anything like that. So how was I going to now transition this interaction, which was a friendly interaction, into something more romantic? And I, like, coming from my history of like being a dating coach and in the past having like certain strategies where we would teach guys about physical touching and escalating by way of meaning like increasing touching and all of these very like complex and fiddly ideas to really be fiddly, because like when you're in the moment, it's like, how am I I need to remember all of these things, right? And I remember thinking to myself like, oh no, now I'm starting to feel stuck, like, because I'm no longer being present to the conversation, and I've started strategizing in my head. And in that point, because of what I just said about having the intention and then just letting go, I did exactly that. I was just like, oh, you know what? Like, let the conversation unfold in the right way, and just be relaxed and just have the intention that this is where I would like it to go, but not being attached to it, like not being like I must like, you know, make this happen, but rather just being in a case of like, oh, this would be lovely, this would be nice, and let's just see where it goes. And so as the interaction unfolded, I actually relaxed, and I was more attentive. I was listening, I was communicating, we were having more laughs and whatnot. Naturally I touched her, and by the end of the night, you know, we kissed. And it was all very natural, and if anything, it was far more spontaneous. Yeah. Because it wasn't like this paint by numbers approach. It wasn't like, you know, I do this and I do that, and often people look for advice, and the most advice that we find is reverse engineered. Yeah. And by that, like, so for example, if you read about body language, there's a lot of reverse engineered body language online, which all says like, you know, you have to lean in or you have to mirror the other person. But what I've discovered about a lot of body language advice is that they've watched people do something, and then it's been assumed that you can reverse engineer it, and then by reverse engineering it, that you can then manipulate it. And perhaps in some cases it's possible, but I've actually found that really when you're living, it's far easier to just let go and let things unfold in a particular way with the right intention. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So that's all our points. I just think it'd be a good point here to just wrap up on what the 5 secrets to great conversation is. We feel like eye contact is 1. Talking with passion and being willing to be bold and polarizing is 2. Listening kind of breaks down into not having a kind of assumption of how someone's going to be speaking, but also just listen to their words and listen to the message and the emotion that's behind that. The 4th thing being taking an interest in the person and really caring about them and responding from a point of view of consideration for that person. And the final thing is letting go of control of the conversation. So yeah, that's perfect, Ahmad. So we've kind of today we after speaking to some of our listeners, we felt that'd be really good to give people an action to kind of take away. They can go away and try out for themselves and get back to us about how that works out for them.
Yeah. So in this episode, the action that we suggest people go out and try is the active listening that we recommended. So the 3 levels again was listening to the words people say, the emotion behind it, and then what's the underlying message. So the task, the challenge,
if you so may take it.
If you so wish to undertake this mission, it will be to go out and when you're talking to people, to pay attention, not just to what they're saying then, but to these additional 2 layers, the emotions, and then what's the underlying message. And you'd be surprised what you can glean from someone just from a few words and how they say hello.
Yeah, I think it's an awesome exercise to do. I highly recommend going out and just, whether it be that you are doing it at work or you do it with your family. This is a really interesting one to do with your family. You know, people you know very well and people you don't know so well. But just, you know, take some time to really listen to what they say. It may even mean that you respond slightly, you know, take a few more seconds to respond. But just take that time. And we'd love to really hear about how that goes for you. Yeah. Like, what kind of response do you get? What sort of emotion comes up for you as well around listening in such a way? So yes, we'd love to hear back about how you get on the challenge or any questions you have for us. We feel like the best place really to contact us is Instagram. Like, we're really active on Instagram, so it's one of the platforms we really love. but also you can get in contact us via our website, or you could just email us at hello@authenticdatingseries.com. Or what else is there? Oh no, also, and if you've really enjoyed the episode, go and subscribe on iTunes, because it's awesome for us to see more and more subscribers, but also to leave a review, and share with your friends and family who could really benefit from what we're saying, because we're really trying to just put a message out in the world of, that dating doesn't have to be hard. Dating can be really just open and honest and authentic.